sitting beside him. It's not that I can't afford it without a membership, but completed stories have better value for money. Ladies and gentlemen, please ensure your Wi-Fi is ready. The exciting tale begins now. That night, when I had a high fever and lost consciousness, Liu Ryan left me at home to find her ex-boyfriend. The next morning, when I woke up in the hospital, I found out the fever had caused memory loss. Yet, I still remembered everyone around me, except for Liu Ryan. That night, when I realized I was burning up with fever, Liu Ryan was already gone. She told me there was an urgent project at work requiring overtime. But what she didn't know was, I overheard her talking on the phone with Itu Makoto. In the quiet space outside the bathroom, I stood in the corner, listening to the faint male voice on the call. Ryan, I'm sick. My stomach hurts really badly. Can you come and keep me company? Then I heard Liu Ryan go silent for a while, but in the end, she still said, wait for me. I stood in the hallway, watching the dull white light casting on the floor. The pale, lifeless glow. I stayed silent until Liu Ryan was about to leave. And then, almost pleading, I said, I think I might have a fever. I'm not feeling well. Could you stay home and be with me? I was genuinely unwell. Yesterday, while bringing an umbrella to Liu Ryan, I got drenched head to toe in the heavy rain. Now I feel the heat with every breath. I have no strength left in my body. But Liu Ryan didn't even turn her head. She just bent down, putting on her shoes casually. I have something to do. You should rest for a bit first. Then she slammed the door shut and left without looking back. Alone at home, I burned with fever, drifting in and out of consciousness. I called Liu Ryan several times, but she didn't pick up. In the end, I gritted my teeth and called my friend Chin Aid. But before he could arrive, everything went black, and I lost all consciousness. When I woke up, everything had changed. Chin Aid looked relieved seeing my eyes open, but Hong Jewel was furious, cursing. That scumbag Liu Ryan. Her boyfriend is burning up with fever, and she's off fooling around with another woman. Jibota added, if you don't break up with her this time, I might as well strangle you now. To save myself the anger later. He glared at me in rage. I blinked in confusion and muttered, who is Liu Ryan? A brief moment of blankness flashed across Chin Aid's face. Then panic crept into his expression as he grabbed my shoulders and nervously asked, are you joking? Jibota snapped, now's really not the time for jokes like this. I tried hard to recall, but I couldn't find any memory related to that name. I shook my head in bewilderment. I'm not joking. Who is Liu Ryan? Chin Aid's legs nearly gave out. He leaned against the corner of the bed, staring at me, before shouting in terror, Doctor! Doctor, his brain's fried. After they finished the CT scan, I sat on the bed eating fruit with the examination report in hand. Chin Aid looked at me in disbelief, scanning me up and down. Crap! You're really something. I thought even if you forgot your parents, you wouldn't forget Liu Ryan. But it turns out you remember everyone else, except her. I frowned and said, so this Liu Ryan was with me. Yet she kept things ambiguous with her ex all the time. Did I have water in my brain to still treasure her so much? Chin Aid let out a cold laugh. Your brain was flooded. Probably nothing but water left in there. No matter how much we scolded you, you wouldn't snap out of it. But it's fine, just break it off with this scumbag this time. And let those two scummy lovebirds be locked together forever. I nodded indifferently. Alright. Just as I finished speaking, the door to the hospital room was suddenly pushed open. A woman in a red dress, wearing high heels, rushed in with a face full of anxiety. The moment she saw me, her expression changed. She walked over to me in big strides. Boater, how are you? I looked up at her, feeling unfamiliar. I didn't recognize her, although she was beautiful. Exactly the type one usually liked. She must be the Liu Ryan Chin Aid mentioned, the one I was a devoted lapdog for 2 years, the one who got together with me, yet still couldn't forget her ex, and left a feverish me alone at home. According to Chin Aid's words, I never heard a single good thing about Liu Ryan. It was all about how she mistreated me, how she'd summon me and discard me at will. Chin Aid has been my best friend since middle school. He wouldn't lie to me. I glanced at Liu Ryan with a hint of disdain. Honestly, the lapdog Chin Aid talked about. That was me. I looked at Liu Ryan with a bit of disdain. Truly, I was that pathetic lapdog Chin Aid had always described. Even I cringe when I think about it. I really don't understand. How could I have turned out like this? A pathetic lapdog with no self-respect, obsessing over a woman who's still hung up on her ex, still entangled and unable to let go. For years, I've been tirelessly devoted, never once bringing up the idea of breaking up. How could I have ended up like this? Even if this woman perfectly fits my aesthetic, I shouldn't have become this person. Liu Ryan noticed the way I was looking at her, and confused. Her steps came to a sudden halt. After a moment, she walked closer, her eyes filled with guilt and tenderness as she looked at me. Boda, I'm sorry. I really didn't know you were this sick yesterday. Chin Aid stood to the side, arms crossed, silently watching, like he was enjoying a show. I frowned. The thought of this woman, having just gotten out of her ex's bed, and now coming here to show concern for me, filled me with an uncontrollable sense of disgust. I dodged the hand she was extending toward me, and said coldly, "Who are you?" It was as if my gaze had stabbed Liu Ryan. She froze for a moment, but quickly continued, "I know you're angry at me. It's my fault this time. I promise it won't happen again." Chin Aid let out a mocking laugh. "Oh, so you're back now? Is Ita Makoto feeling better? Not uncomfortable anymore? Now you finally have time to come back?" A flicker of panic flashed across Liu Ryan's face. She hurriedly grabbed my hand and explained, "There's nothing between me and Ita Makoto. He just wasn't feeling well yesterday, and he doesn't have any relatives or friends here. So that's why he reached out to me. Nothing happened between me and him." Oda, you have to believe me. I forcefully pulled my hand away and wiped it on the bedsheet in disgust. With a cold voice, I said, "Liu Ryan, I had a fever last night, and it messed up my brain. I lost my memory. I don't remember you anymore. Show some respect, will you?" At first, Liu Ryan didn't believe I had really lost my memory. She thought I was just mad, and kept trying to sweet-talk me out of it, coaxing me for a long time. Until I finally lost patience and told her to get lost. Her expression suddenly changed drastically. She stared at me, barely holding her composure. "You're telling me to get lost? Boda, do you really not remember me?" When those words came out of my mouth, she looked utterly shocked, like I had never spoken to her that way before. Maybe it was my icy demeanor, but Liu Ryan eventually had no choice but to accept reality. She sat down, completely dejected, looking heartbroken. "How could you forget me? This can't be happening." Chin Aid couldn't stand watching anymore. He mocked. Maybe even the heavens couldn't take it anymore. "Liu Ryan, do you even deserve to be called a human? When I arrived last night, Jiboda was nearly delirious from the fever. If I had come any later, who knows what might have happened? And where were you at that time? At your ex-boyfriend's place, taking care of him. Why don't you just get lost already? Stop making everyone sick with your presence." Liu Ryan lowered her head and said painfully, "I'm sorry, Boda. I'm really sorry. I really didn't know you were that seriously ill." I looked at her coldly and said, "Now that I've really lost my memory, I can't even imagine why I was so in love with you before. Losing my dignity, losing myself, just to stay by your side. And yet, when I was gravely ill, you abandoned me, just because your ex-boyfriend said he had a stomachache." Liu Ryan seemed hurt by the look in my eyes. She avoided my gaze, covering her face in sorrow, but inside I felt absolutely nothing. I calmly told her, "Since I no longer remember you, and your heart is still with your ex, let's part ways peacefully." My words struck her like a bolt out of the blue. Liu Ryan suddenly raised her head. Her expression completely changed. Her face twisted as if she had just swallowed a dead fly. She blurted out, "No, that's not right. I won't break up with you. Aren't you the one who's so hung up on your ex, that Itu Makoto? I heard you brought up breaking up with me several times before, and I always refused. Now I'm giving you what you wanted. You're free." But Liu Ryan's expression was far from the relief and happiness of having her wish fulfilled. Instead, deep pain clouded her eyes, as if it wasn't she who left me for her ex, but who had abandoned her. "Oda, how could you say such a thing? There's nothing between me and Itu Makoto. It's just that." She suddenly couldn't even continue her explanation. Ashamed, she lowered her head, her face turning pale. I found the situation absurd, especially considering she had blatantly done it right in front of me, still tangled up with her ex. And now she's putting on some act of deep affection for me? Liu Ryan walked up to me, as if she had just taken a huge blow. She wanted to hold my hand, but didn't dare to, so she could only stand by my bed, pleading, Don't talk about breaking up. Boda, the doctor said your memory might come back. It's my fault for going too far this time. Please give me a chance to make it up to you. Let's make things right between us. Didn't you always want to travel abroad? When you get better, I'll take time off immediately, and we'll go on a month-long trip, okay? I looked at this remorseful woman and asked curiously, "Why are you doing this? Don't you love Itu Makoto?" Liu Ryan froze, as if my question had stumped her. I continued, "If you don't like him, then why, when you were with me, did you leave me just because of something he said? If you do like him, then why are you acting this way now?" I frowned. "Liu Ryan, what do you really want?" Liu Ryan stared at me in confusion. Her lips moved, but she couldn't utter a single word. It was as if she didn't even know her own feelings anymore. Seeing her like this annoyed me. The version of myself that Chin-A talked about, so deeply infatuated it's hard to imagine, but all that reckless love was evaporated by just a small fever. Now, looking at this woman I supposedly loved for 2 years, I feel absolutely nothing anymore. All that's left is an instinctive sense of disgust. I'm not negotiating with you. I'm informing you. I have absolutely no feelings for you now. If I've become this way, you bear some of the blame too. How could I possibly stay with you? For some reason, seeing the pain on Liu Ryan's face, I felt an indescribable sense of pleasure deep within me. It's like the memories of this woman are gone, but the wounds she left are carved into my bones and have never healed. I spoke almost maliciously. "Liu Ryan, you're absolutely revolting." Her expression, it was like someone had force-fed her a pound of bitter rice. She stared at me in disbelief, as if what I just said wasn't mere words, but a knife that pierced straight through her. I watched as her face turned ghostly pale, but I felt nothing inside. According to Chin-A, this was a woman I'd feel heartache for if she got a mosquito bite. I would rush to bring her an umbrella in a downpour. I would stay up all night, taking care of her when she had cramps, boiling ginger and brown sugar water for her to drink. I chased her across countless miles, to a city where I had no friends or family. Suddenly, it hit me. Love truly is both resilient and fragile. When love is alive, no matter how much hardship or suffering it endures, it doesn't wear away one bit, but just a single high fever, and that love vanished without a trace. The woman in front of me, her expression is full of sadness, yet I feel no sympathy at all. I didn't even bother to look at Liu Ryan, just turned over and lay down to sleep. During the few days I was under observation in the hospital, Liu Ryan practically moved in there. She took leave from work, staying by my side day and night without rest. I never paid her any attention. After I was discharged, I went straight to our place, packed up all my belongings, and rented my own place to live. When I left, Liu Ryan didn't try to stop me. She just stood there, watching me intently, her eyes filled with sorrow. "Will you come back?" she asked as I glanced at her one last time, then got into the car and drove away. Through the rearview mirror, I saw her still standing by the roadside, staring in the direction of the car. I started to get curious about our relationship. I wanted to know, what exactly made me so obsessed with this woman for the past 2 years? What was it that made our relationship so tangled and complicated? Fortunately, I have a habit of keeping a journal. Although my memories of Liu Ryan have faded, over the past 2 years, I filled several thick journals. That night, lying in bed, I began flipping through them. Records about Liu Ryan were easy to find, because in these journals, most of the entries were about her. May 18th, I saw a girl on the playground today. She's really pretty, exactly my type. May 19th, I ran into her again today at the library entrance. I was going in, and she was just coming out. We only brushed past each other. But seeing her up close, she looked even more beautiful. It's like there are stars in her eyes. May 20th, that girl came to the library again yesterday. She even asked to borrow a pen from me. When I talked to her, I was so nervous I could barely open my mouth. Oh no, this must be the feeling of falling in love. Page after page, all filled with the thoughts of a young heart. Turns out it only took Liu Ryan asking to borrow a pen from me for her to completely capture my heart, leaving no room for anything else. After that, my journal became all about Liu Ryan. She often went to the library, and the books she read were really profound. Some were even in foreign languages, which I couldn't understand at all. To get closer to her, I even started teaching myself a foreign language, clumsily trying to strike up conversations with her. Liu Ryan was always a bit distant, never initiating conversations with me. But I was tireless in seeking her out. During that time, she always seemed to be in a bad mood, even frowning while reading, looking somewhat depressed. I would rack my brain trying to find topics to talk to her about, telling her jokes that weren't funny at all. Even after being turned down several times, I kept insisting on inviting her out to eat. I kept it up for several months. It wasn't until after yet another time, when I found an excuse to ask her out again, that she finally gave me a helpless smile. It was the first time she ever smiled at me, and it was the first time she agreed to go out with me. That day marked the beginning of our relationship. As I flipped through page after page of my journal, the events felt entirely unfamiliar, but the emotions were overwhelmingly familiar. When Liu Ryan rejected me, I felt heartbroken, but when she agreed, I was overjoyed, practically floating with excitement. Such earnest feelings were recorded day after day on paper. Through the slightly yellowed pages, I could almost see it. A young, still innocent face, leaning over a desk, either frowning or grinning, writing down every little detail about Liu Ryan, stroke by stroke. In truth, that first year with Liu Ryan was actually quite happy, though she was always a bit distant and never said she liked me. She still took care of me in her own way. If I mentioned wanting to eat from a certain late-night spot, she'd cross half the city late at night just to get it for me. When we walked together and she got tired, she'd act cute and ask me to carry her. On cold winter nights, I would hold her close, warming up her icy hands and feet until she fell asleep. Back then, my journals were full of sweetness, happiness practically spilling out from every line. I believed I had found the one I loved, and thought she loved me too, even though she never said it out loud. But with so many guys liking her, why did she choose me of all people, and never once mentioned breaking up? I sat on my bed, reading each sentence, realizing those were the happiest times of these 2 years. Then Itu Makoto came back, and everything turned upside down. At first, I didn't pay much attention to it. Itu Makoto, a boyfriend she broke up with a year ago, I didn't think it would be an issue. Liu Ryan didn't hide it from me either. When Itu Makoto returned to the country, she even brought me along to have a meal with him. I always thought they were just amicable exes who shouldn't be part of each other's lives anymore. The only person Liu Ryan should love now is me. But after that, Liu Ryan's attitude towards me changed. She no longer went out of her way across the city to get me the late-night snacks I craved. She stopped acting cute, asking me to carry her, and she no longer wanted to go on walks with me. Every time I tried to hug her from behind, she would shrug me off, impatiently saying, "It's hot. Stop clinging to me while I'm sleeping." Overnight, my lover completely changed. Her love for me faded like smoke, disappearing all too quickly. Liu Ryan started contacting Itu Makoto more and more frequently. Many nights, I'd wake up startled, only to find the bed empty beside me. Liu Ryan would be locked on the balcony, staring blankly at her phone. Even though I was right by her side, her expression looked so lonely. That's when I realized the person in her heart was never me. How naive I was back then. I always believed that if I just stayed by her, she would eventually see her true feelings. But the truth was far more brutal than I could have imagined. One night, I got up and found that Liu Ryan was missing again. I was about to go look for her when I overheard low, restrained arguing coming from the balcony. In the more than 2 years I had been with Liu Ryan, her emotions were always very reserved. Sometimes I even felt like nothing could really get to her, that nothing could shake her emotionally. Even when we argued, she would just watch with cold eyes, while I was the only one getting angry. She never argued back, nor would she try to comfort me. In the end, I would calm down on my own and sheepishly go back to her. She never held a grudge, and we would move on as if nothing happened. But this was the first time I saw her so out of control. I hid in the corner, watching as she argued on the phone with red eyes. She was so agitated. "You left without a word back then. Dumped me like a dog and left me here. And now you come back like nothing happened?" Itu Makoto, do you have any idea what I went through during that time? Do you know? Itu Makoto must have said something in response, because Liu Ryan wiped the tears from her face, tiredly said, "Yes, I was with him just to spite you. So what? You didn't want me anymore, and there were plenty of people eager to be with me." I stood frozen in the corner, my mind completely blank. Her words felt like a sharp sword, stabbing straight through my heart, pinning me in place. In that moment, I finally realized what I thought was mutual love this past year was nothing but a childish game. Liu Ryan was just angry that Itu Makoto left the country without hesitation, so she chose me to get back at him. No wonder, with so many people pursuing her, she specifically chose me. It wasn't that she particularly chose me. It was simply because I chased her the hardest, and she just happened to need someone like that. A tool to vent her frustration towards Itu Makoto. She picked me conveniently. It wasn't that she truly chose me. It was that as long as the person wasn't Itu Makoto, it could have been anyone. And all these years of supposed sweetness and happiness, my sincere love, in her heart was merely desperate pursuit. I shrank back into the corner, my thoughts in complete disarray. When the pain reaches its peak, a person becomes numb instead. That squeezing ache in my heart, the twisting of my insides all subsided. All I felt was exhaustion. Just standing there had drained all the energy out of me. Even with my mind in utter chaos, a small part of me still thought, actually, Liu Ryan isn't wrong. All these years, it really was just me desperately pursuing her. She never once actively responded to me. I thought she didn't say "I love you" because she was shy. But it turns out she simply didn't love me at all. The one she loved, from beginning to end, was always someone else. I can't even remember how I made it back to bed that day. That night, Liu Ryan didn't come back to the bedroom to sleep. The two of us, one on the balcony, One in the bedroom. Both stayed up all night, unable to sleep for the ones we loved. But the next morning when I saw her, I forced a smile and calmly asked, "What do you want for breakfast? How about I cook something for you?" Looking back now, I can hardly understand why I was so submissive back then. I was a proud person too, but later I figured it out. It was because at that time, I loved Liu Ryan too much. I knew that if I spoke up, I would be giving Liu Ryan a justified reason to break up, and I couldn't lose her. I wouldn't be able to bear it. So, I had no choice but to stitch up my shattered chest by myself, silently bleeding inside. For Liu Ryan, breaking up would have been a form of release, but for me at that time, it would have felt like an execution. From that point on, this relationship became a torment. Liu Ryan and Ito Makoto both were such proud people. Even though they loved each other, neither was willing to be the first to bow. This tug-of-war dragged on for days. But in the end, the only one truly hurt was me. I was tortured and bleeding, slowly drained of life. If the previous two journals were filled with bright and joyful moments, then this one is completely shrouded in dark agony. I once curled up in a corner by myself, my heart shattered beyond recognition. Yet I still clung desperately to Liu Ryan, unwilling to let go, like drinking poison to quench thirst. For me, Liu Ryan was that bottle of poison. I put down the journal. The stories within feel entirely foreign to me now. The emotions recorded there have long since faded. It feels like these aren't my memories, but the story of a stranger. As I read, all I felt was pity mixed with ridicule. Completely unable to relate. How stupid I was. I slapped my own face. I can't believe I was once so foolish and pathetic. This realization made me unconsciously harbor hatred towards Liu Ryan whenever I saw her. Because seeing her, I'm reminded that I once acted like a pitiful dog, and this woman was the main culprit who trampled on my dignity. She really turned me into a dog that came when called and was discarded just as easily. I looked at Liu Ryan's pale face and thought to myself, what the hell for? It's been more than half a month since Liu Ryan last came to see me. When I saw her again, she looked much more worn out, carrying the weight of exhaustion on her shoulders. Her eyes, bloodshot and weary, stared at me. I don't know if it was just my imagination, but I seemed to see a hint of pleading in her eyes. I sneered inside. How could that be possible? When has Liu Ryan ever pleaded with me? The one who always begged in our relationship was me. But things are different now. I stared at her coldly and said with disdain, "Why aren't you with Ito Makoto? What are you coming to me for?" Liu Ryan flinched under my gaze, lowering her head hastily. After a moment, her hoarse voice broke the silence. "Boda, let's talk." I reached out to close the door. "There's nothing to talk about between us. Let's end things peacefully. Isn't that what you've always wanted?" Liu Ryan blocked the door, pleading, "Just give me a moment. We've been together for 2 years. Even if you want to end it, we should at least have a proper conversation, right?" I thought for a moment and agreed. This relationship deserves a closure, not for the person I am now, but for the man who used to lie awake at night, in pain so deep it took his breath away, until he became numb. I opened the door wider and let Liu Ryan come in. She seemed like she had been drinking. The smell of alcohol lingered on her, and her steps were unsteady. She sat down on the sofa, rubbing her reddened eyes. Her voice was rough, as if she had been crying. "Boda, these past few days without you, I finally figured it out. I really can't let you go. I want to make it up to you." She lifted her head, her eyes bloodshot. "Can you give me one more chance?" She looked so sorrowful, as if all this time, the one who had been hurt was her. A sudden wave of anger rose in my heart. How could she stand here acting like the victim, when the one who was hurt all along was me? I mocked her. "Liu Ryan, did the fever fry your brain too? Do you not remember what you said to Ito Makoto on the balcony? Liu Ryan's head snapped up in shock. I lifted my journal and repeated her words slowly. I was with him just to spite you. So what? You didn't want me anymore, and plenty of people were eager to be with me. Is it that you and Ito Makoto are having issues again? So now you need me, your backup. To make him jealous? Liu Ryan looked like she'd been struck by lightning. She heard my cold laugh. You said it so loudly. Even the deaf could have heard it. Ito Makoto left you behind like a dog when he went abroad, and out of spite. You used me to get back at him. Was I just too convenient a tool for you? Please, I'm begging you. Liu Ryan, I stared at her intently. With bitterness in my voice, I've never wronged you. For the past 2 years, I was devoted to you. What did I ever do to you? To deserve being tortured over and over again? Why don't you go find someone else to mess with? The pain in Liu Ryan's eyes grew layer upon layer. Her face turned ashen white. In an instant, all the color drained from her face. It's not like that. I wasn't trying to use you to get back at him. I was. She choked on her words, holding her head in agony. At the beginning, yes, I did approach you with the intent of spiting Ito Makoto. I admit it, but these past few days without you, I suddenly realized I didn't think of Ito Makoto even once. My mind was filled entirely with you. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. Every time I opened or closed my eyes, all I saw was your face. Boda! I think what I felt for Ito Makoto was just unresolved resentment. That turned into an obsession. Now I finally understand my own heart. I really do like you. She lifted her head, her eyes full of desperation. If it were the past, hearing those words from her would have made me ecstatic. My journals detailed it so clearly. Back then, whenever I was at my breaking point, I would fantasize about this very moment. I'd imagine that one day, Liu Ryan would truly fall in love with me. And when that day came, I'd be the one to high for her to reach. She'd be on her knees begging for me. But now that this day has actually come, all those memories feel distant and irrelevant. Inside, I felt nothing, just a sense of irony. A late confession holds less value than grass. If a simple phrase like this could erase all the pain, then what about those countless nights when I was suffocating in heartache? Were those just meaningless? I looked at her and softly said, Liu Ryan. So what? She froze in confusion. I continued, you think just because you've now seen your true feelings, I should come running back to you? The one you owe an apology to isn't me. I stood up, looking into her eyes. I said each word clearly, the G Boda who loved you. He died that night when you left him alone at home. For Ito Makoto, Liu Ryan's body trembled, her eyes filled with unbearable pain. I pointed at the door and said, leave. When Liu Ryan walked out, she was utterly defeated. Like someone had drained the life out of her, leaving behind nothing but an empty shell. Now that I've distanced myself from this relationship, I can somewhat understand what she really feels. It's simply the idea that what you can't have is always the most desirable. Did she really love Ito Makoto that much? I used to think she was hopelessly in love with him. But now I'm not so sure. If she truly loved Ito Makoto that deeply, she could have taken this chance to be with him. In my eyes, her feelings for Ito Makoto are more about pride than love. She's someone who's used to being pursued, and this was the first time she got dumped. That unwillingness turned into an obsession over time, but even this obsession is outweighed by her pride. She never once swallowed her pride to try and win him back. And as for me, it's doubtful that she truly likes me as much as she claims. It's more likely that she just got used to being with me and felt uncomfortable once I left. I pulled back the curtains and saw that Liu Ryan hadn't left. She was still standing under the sycamore tree outside my building. The wind blew her coat collar up around her chin, and she looked noticeably thinner. Standing there, she looked quite lonely. The wind outside grew stronger, and I heard raindrops tapping against the window. It started raining, but Liu Ryan still didn't leave. The rain quickly intensified. Yet she seemed unaware, just standing there motionless, letting the heavy rain drench her completely. As night deepened, the streets emptied out, leaving her as the only figure under the dim streetlight, frozen in place like a statue. My phone buzzed with a message. It was from Liu Ryan. "If I endure all the pain you went through, would you be willing to forgive me?" I scoffed as I read it, watching her stand there in the rain. Then I calmly pulled the curtains shut. What's the point of putting on this act now? The hurt I've suffered won't lessen one bit. There was a time when I was afraid she'd get wet in the rain, and I'd rush across the city in a downpour to bring her an umbrella. But now, seeing her soaked in the heavy rain, I felt nothing at all. I only thought, karma's real. No one escapes the hand of fate. I never expected Ito Makoto to reach out to me. When I received a message from him saying he wanted to talk, I paid no attention to it. I had no desire to get entangled with him, so I didn't bother replying. But who would have thought he'd somehow find out my address and corner me as I was heading out for a walk? I looked at the man in a suit standing in front of me, holding his head high, with that same arrogant stance. He is indeed a very handsome man. I started to understand why Liu Ryan was so unwilling to let him go. To put it simply, Ito Makoto and Liu Ryan are the same type of people. They are naturally privileged. Whether it's their looks, family background, or abilities, they are destined to stand above others. They're used to being chased and accustomed to pride. Perhaps the attraction between them is the pull of similar kinds. Jiboda, right? "Hello, I'm Ito Makoto." He extended his pale hand, tilting his chin slightly upward. With a cold expression, I frowned and didn't reach out. I felt an instinctive dislike for this man. Even though all memories of him have faded, the underlying hostility remains. He and Liu Ryan have both struck countless arrows at my heart, leaving it riddled with wounds. Even if I've grown used to it now, those old scars are still far from healed. Seeing him immediately sank my mood to rock bottom. I pretended not to see him and walked right past him. I dislike Ito Makoto, not just because he's Liu Ryan's idealized love, but also because he knowingly interfered. Despite Liu Ryan already having a boyfriend, people like him are always self-centered, never caring if they hurt others. They have no moral boundaries and are utterly selfish. Ito Makoto called out from behind me. "Wait, about Liu Ryan. I want to talk to you." I turned back and gave him a cold stare. I've already lost my memory. If you like Liu Ryan, she's all yours. There's nothing for us to talk about. Ito Makoto rubbed his forehead, and a slight smirk tugged at his lips. "I think you don't want to be seen talking here, do you? I just want to say a few words. Once I'm done, I'll leave. I won't bother you again." I was irritated, but I also feared that if I ignored him, he would keep seeking me out. To be honest, he and Liu Ryan are two people I never want to see again. "There's a cafe over there," I said impatiently. "You've got 20 minutes. After that, don't come looking for me again." Sitting in the cafe, Ito Makoto stirred his coffee with a small spoon. I disliked his attitude. He always gave off an air of superiority, just like Liu Ryan used to. "You probably already know about me and Liu Ryan," Ito Makoto said, lifting his chin slightly. "I was with her for less time than you were, about a year or so. Did she ever tell you she loved you?" "Of course not," I replied. "I chased Liu Ryan for months before she reluctantly agreed to be with me." She didn't even give me a clear answer, just nodded slightly. Ito Makoto didn't seem to care about my response and continued speaking. "Liu Ryan can be quite persistent. She doesn't stop until she gets what she wants. Back then, she chased me for 6 months. She would sit next to me in class and follow me after school. When our team won the championship, she ran straight up to me and kissed me out of nowhere. She made it known to everyone, forcing me to be with her. The Liu Ryan he described felt so unfamiliar to me. In front of me, Liu Ryan always seemed A bit distant. She never openly acknowledged my existence. Never posted about me on her social media. Never introduced me to her friends. And never kissed me in public. I always thought it was just her naturally cold personality. But it turns out she could be passionate too. Even though I've already forgotten about her. Hearing Itu Makoto talk about this, I couldn't help but picture Liu Ryan in my mind, with her aloof demeanor, kissing the man she truly liked in front of everyone at the competition. A slight pang hit my chest. That feeling was both foreign and familiar. Itu Makoto smirked slightly, as if mocking me for being just a minor character who should have exited their fairytale romance. That's just how she is, never caring about what's embarrassing or not. If she wants something, she goes for it no matter what. Later, when I went abroad, I heard she locked herself in her room for 3 days and nights, without eating or drinking, until she fainted, and had to be rushed to the hospital. He sighed, lowering his gaze. Someone as proud as her would never bow down to me. She'd only try to provoke me in other ways. It must have been hard on you, he added, with a tone that seemed sympathetic, but was laced with hidden contempt. Listening to his supposedly pitying yet condescending words, I couldn't help but smile. She never bows down to anyone, does she? Yesterday, she even came begging me for forgiveness, I said, standing in the rain all night long. Feigning surprise, I added, "You didn't know?" Itu Makoto's head jerked up, his expression instantly changing. I watched his stunned face, smiling as I took a sip of coffee. "Seems like you don't know Liu Ryan as well as you think." "Well, considering you to have been apart for so many years, it makes sense." His fingers tightened around the coffee cup, the knuckles turning pale. He struggled to maintain his calm demeanor. "I'm not here to argue with you. Since you don't remember Liu Ryan anymore, there's no need for you to keep clinging to her, right? Your relationship was a mistake from the start. It's time she got back on track." I sneered, "What's the point of telling me this? Right now, it's Liu Ryan clinging to me, not the other way around. If you're so capable, get her back with you. If you can't, then sit tight and stay out of it." This man truly tested my patience, whether before or after I lost my memory. He always had this brazen attitude, hurting others without a care. Itu Makoto, do you have an addiction to interfering in other people's lives? I stood up, looking down at him, and mocked, "Now everyone's staring at us." The attention in the cafe shifted towards us, with curious eyes fixed on the scene. A couple nearby had a front row seat, whispering excitedly, "Is the third party confronting the original partner? Wow, this is shameless." Itu Makoto's face turned ashen. He gritted his teeth and forced out, "What are you talking about? Are you crazy?" I ignored him, turning around and walking away. "Since you insisted I come, you can pay the bill yourself." I walked ahead, but Itu Makoto kept following closely behind, afraid I might cause another scene on the street. He didn't dare come too close, keeping a cautious distance. It seemed like he planned to confront me again once I reached the entrance. I was growing increasingly irritated, ready to turn around and end this nonsense, when, from afar, I suddenly noticed someone standing under the tree near my building. It was Liu Ryan. Great. Now all three of us were here. Liu Ryan saw me from a distance. A faint smile appeared on her face, and she was just about to wave at me. But then she noticed Itu Makoto behind me. The smile instantly vanished from her face. Her hand froze mid-air. She immediately started striding toward me. Itu Makoto noticed her as well. His face paled for a moment, but he quickly regained his composure, greeting her with a smile. What a coincidence! Liu Ryan ignored him, frowning as she stopped in front of him. "What are you doing here? What did you say to him?" Itu Makoto's smile wavered. He stammered, "I didn't say much. Just casual talk." There was barely contained anger in Liu Ryan's voice. "I told you to stay away from him. What exactly are you trying to do?" I stood by, coldly watching the scene unfold. This was certainly something new. In the past, this was always something Liu Ryan said to me. She warned me repeatedly, telling me not to go looking for Itu Makoto, and I actually listened to her, never once going to find him. Now, the one she's warning is Itu Makoto. How the tables have turned. Our roles have completely reversed. Itu Makoto probably felt embarrassed, being scolded by Liu Ryan in front of me. His face darkened, his expression stiffening as he looked at Liu Ryan. With a sharp tone, he asked, "Liu Ryan, what's your deal? You were the one who clung to me first. And now you're telling me to get lost? What do you take me for?" I crossed my arms, standing by and watching the drama unfold. Liu Ryan glanced at me, then lowered her voice, saying, "Stop making a scene. I won't come looking for you anymore. We already broke up a long time ago." Itu Makoto clenched his fists tightly. "You think you can just end it like that? What was all that before, then?" He turned towards me, staring intensely, and shouted, "Every night while she was with you, she was still in contact with me. Do you know what she told me?" There was a malicious curve to his lips. She would reminisce about our past, saying how much she hated me for abandoning her, and that she was only with you to spite me. Enough, Liu Ryan cut him off sharply, her eyes burning with barely restrained anger. "Haven't you caused enough trouble?" "I'm not done." Itu Makoto's voice grew louder, his voice trembling slightly, and his eyes began to redden. "Liu Ryan, you were the one who came to me first. Every single time, it was you who came to find me first. And now you casually tell me to leave? You don't really mean that," he said, his voice trembling. The sky was growing darker, the autumn night already carrying a chill in the air. Around us, only a few warm, yellow streetlights flickered on. Tears glistened briefly in Itu Makoto's eyes, as he looked at Liu Ryan with reddened eyes. Choking back a sob, "Didn't you tell me? You were only with him to spite me? Now that I'm back, why are you still going to him?" Liu Ryan was at a loss for words. She hesitated for a long moment before speaking in a muffled voice. "I'm sorry. I never really loved you. I was just unwilling to let go, and I mistook that for love. Now I finally realize the person I've truly loved all along is Jiboter. When you left, I was only holding on to pride. But when he left," she clutched her chest in confusion. "It hurts here, so much it's unbearable. Like a part of me was ripped away, leaving an empty space. Now I finally understand what love really is. I can't live without Jiboter." She glanced at Itu Makoto. "We're done. In fact, we've been done for a long time." Itu Makoto's eyes shot up in surprise, and I saw a tear slip down his cheek. The look he gave Liu Ryan was filled with hatred. After a brief silence, he spoke in a trembling voice, his tone full of resentment. "Liu Ryan, you're always like this. Do you know why I left the country back then? I never felt any real love from you. You just thought I was the only one worthy of you. You're just used to chasing after what's best. From beginning to end, you never really loved me." Tears streamed down his face, yet he stubbornly refused to wipe them away. He simply stared at Liu Ryan in despair, saying, "People like you don't even know what love is. You don't deserve to be loved. Jiboter doesn't even remember you anymore. That's your karma." With that, he gave Liu Ryan one final glance, then turned and walked away with stumbling steps. His thin, forlorn figure looked utterly defeated and lonely. The atmosphere became tense and frozen. Liu Ryan let out a bitter laugh, walked up to me, and whispered, "He's right. I deserve this. This is my punishment." Even though I resented this woman in my heart, seeing her, once so full of life, now looking so haggard, as if she'd become someone entirely different, I couldn't help but feel a bit sorry for her. But that's as far as my pity goes. I said nothing more, just turned and walked away. The wind was picking up, blowing my hair into a disheveled mess. A wave of irritation suddenly surged within me. Liu Ryan's voice drifted behind me in the night. Gee, Boda, I'm willing to atone to beg you. I widened my eyes. In my memory, Liu Ryan never begged anyone. The word beg didn't exist in her vocabulary. She was always so proud. Proud to the point of arrogance. How could someone like her say she's begging me? I stopped in my tracks, about to respond, when suddenly, Liu Ryan's panicked voice screamed, "Boda, get out of the way." Before I could react, I was tackled from behind. After a loud crash, I was violently thrown against the curb. My vision went black for a moment, leaving me dizzy and disoriented. I anxiously turned to look back, only to see that the spot where I had just been standing was now covered in shattered pieces of a flower pot. Blood began pooling beneath Liu Ryan's head, a bright red stain slowly spreading on the pavement. She lay there with her eyes closed, completely unresponsive. The flower pot had been blown down by the strong wind. It was supposed to hit me, but Liu Ryan pushed me out of the way, and it struck her head instead. My mind went blank in an instant. Tears started falling uncontrollably. Panicking, I rushed over and shook Liu Ryan. "Hey, Liu Ryan!" She remained motionless, showing no signs of life. With trembling hands, I fumbled to pull out my phone, my fingers shaking so badly I could barely press the buttons. It took me several tries to finally dial the emergency number. "Hello," I cried, unable to hold back my tears. "Someone's been knocked unconscious. Her head is bleeding, please send an ambulance." The ambulance arrived quickly. Within 10 minutes, it was already downstairs. Two doctors in white coats swiftly lifted Liu Ryan onto the stretcher and into the ambulance. I climbed in after them, sitting beside her. The harsh, pale light inside the ambulance cast a ghostly glow on Liu Ryan's face, draining away any trace of color. Her once rosy lips had turned ashen. Blood still trickled from her head. Her long hair matted and stuck together. Dried blood stained her forehead, and she lay there unconscious, unaware of anything. In that moment, a long-lost, tearing pain surged through my heart. The memories may be gone, but loving this woman has become a habit, etched into my very bones and blood. Once a wound is torn open, those long-suppressed feelings come flooding back, overwhelming me. My vision blurred with tears as I watched them carry Liu Ryan off the ambulance, straight into the operating room. In that moment, I realized memories can be forgotten, but love cannot be erased. Those 3 hours waiting outside the surgery room felt like an eternity. My mind was a chaotic mess, a tangle of confusion, yet it also felt completely empty, like a blank void. I could only stare blankly at the glowing red light outside the surgery room, lost in a daze. Suddenly, fragments of past memories rushed through my mind like a river. I tried to grasp them, but couldn't hold on to anything. In the end, all those swirling memories merged into one image: Liu Ryan's face. When I returned after paying the fees, Liu Ryan had already been moved to a hospital room. Her face was deathly pale, her lips slightly chapped. She had already lost weight over the past few days. Now her hospital gown hung loosely on her, making her look almost unrecognizable. I sat by her side, my eyes stinging with tears. Just as tears began to fall, Liu Ryan's weak voice broke the silence, even though her entire head was wrapped tightly in bandages, and she looked utterly miserable. Her eyes still sparkled with a hint of laughter. "Why are you crying?" I stubbornly replied. "Mind your own business. I cry if I want to." Liu Ryan closed her eyes, rested for a moment, then struggled to open them again. Her voice so faint it was almost inaudible. "Boda, will you forgive me?" She looked like she was on the verge of collapse, and in that moment, I was panicked and at a loss. I was about to agree, but for some reason, the word forgive got stuck in my throat, and I just couldn't say it. Liu Ryan glanced at me. A hint of disappointment flashed in her eyes. I was about to speak when the doctor walked up from behind. "Are you the family member?" he asked. "The patient's fine. The flower pot only caused some superficial wounds." We did a CT scan of her brain, and everything looks normal. There might be a slight concussion, but we'll need to keep her under observation. I was stunned. She's okay? The doctor gave me a sideways glance. You sound a little disappointed. I quickly waved my hands in embarrassment. No, not at. I turned to look at Liu Ryan on the bed. She was pretending to be asleep, but the corners of her mouth couldn't help but curl upward, her eyelashes fluttering slightly. Damn it, I've been tricked. All those tears for nothing. I coldly replied, alright, I understand. After the doctor left, Liu Ryan dared to open her eyes. She grinned sheepishly, grabbing my hand. I'm sorry, it's just that ... her head. And bitterly smiled. It's been so long since you've cared about me like this. A shiver ran through me, and bitten memories of those sleepless nights flooded my mind again. I instinctively pulled my hand away from hers. Liu Ryan doesn't have any close relatives here. So during the days she was in the hospital, I was the one taking care of her. Ito Makoto came by once as well. I'm not sure what he and Liu Ryan talked about, but when he left, he gave me a complicated look. His eyes were red. I didn't say anything, just walked into the hospital room. Liu Ryan was sitting on the bed, staring out the window. When she saw me come in, her eyes lit up slightly. Boda, she called out as I sat down in the chair next to her bed. I didn't know what to say. Liu Ryan cautiously spoke. I just made things clear with Ito Makoto. He won't come looking for me again. I glanced at her, but remained silent. Liu Ryan continued, I've been thinking a lot these past few days. It's strange, really. Getting hit on the head actually made things clearer for me. She let out a soft, self-deprecating laugh. In a way, Ito Makoto saw things more clearly than I did. All this time, maybe I never truly loved him. I was just used to, always wanting the best. Everyone was getting into relationships, so I had to find the most attractive, the most impressive guy to be with. Honestly, when we were together, I just thought it was what I was supposed to do. I never felt this kind of deep longing like I do now. Liu Ryan sat there in her hospital gown, her head lowered, sitting on the bed. She rarely showed such vulnerability. It felt like she was laying her heart bare, revealing everything to me. When he left for abroad, most of what I felt was just resentment. I had never been dumped before, and it bruised my pride. She gave a bitter smile. Looking back now, it was so foolish. I could never really understand my own feelings. Even when it comes to you, it wasn't until you left me that I realized I had already fallen for you a long time ago. I had no words in response. You've already regained your memory, haven't you? Liu Ryan's smile was tinged with bitterness. I glanced at her. After 2 years of sharing a bed, we probably knew each other better than we knew ourselves. It didn't surprise me that she could tell. When did you figure it out? Liu Ryan's lips twitched slightly. On the ambulance. Her eyes held a trace of longing. She tried to smile, but couldn't manage it. In the end, she barely managed to say, the way you looked at me, it was just like before. My heart ached, but I stayed silent. Liu Ryan tilted her head back, forcing out a faint smile. But it was a hollow smile, one that looked more painful than anything else. You still love me, don't you? I looked at her, fixing my gaze steadily. When the memories returned, the love came rushing back too. I don't want to love this woman. Loving her has left me covered in scars. But despite everything, I'm deeply entangled, unable to free myself. A glimmer of hope flickered in Liu Ryan's eyes, but it quickly dimmed. But you won't forgive me, will you? I thought for a moment, then stood up and walked to the window. The leaves outside had already turned yellow. A thick layer covered the ground. Looking at the bare branches, I suddenly and inexplicably thought of that story about the bedridden child who said that when the last leaf fell from the tree, their life would come to an end. Liu Ryan is alive and well now, but something else has died. Our love is dead, and what's dead cannot be brought back to life. with my back to Liu Ryan. I spoke softly. Yes, I remember everything now. I still love you, but I won't forgive you. I was blinded by love before, but after losing everything, I realized just how wrong I was. Life isn't only about love, and love isn't worth sacrificing my dignity for. I turned around, looking at Liu Ryan with a serious expression. Liu Ryan, what's lost is lost. Mistakes can be corrected, but time cannot be turned back. I can't pretend it never happened. If I were to be with you again, I would probably think every day about how you left me at home sick. All because of something E2 Makoto said. There's a thorn lodged in my heart that I'll never be able to remove. I'll never be truly happy for the rest of my life. If I forgive you, I walked over and held her hand, but I'd never be able to forgive myself. I've been through enough pain. This was the first time since our breakup that we had such an honest conversation. We laid everything bare before each other. Liu Ryan's eyes turned red. She seemed crushed by the weight of my words. Clinging desperately to my hand, choking back tears, she pleaded, I won't do it again. I really won't. Just this once, please? She suddenly broke down, burying her head in my hand, and sobbed uncontrollably. Her entire body trembled uncontrollably. I was wrong. Please, I'm begging you. Her burning tears fell onto my hand. The warmth sent a shiver through my heart. I'm sorry, I choked out. I used to love you more than I loved myself. But now, I think I need to learn to love myself first. Liu Ryan's body collapsed inch by inch. Her sobs muffled as she clung to my hand. The woman who was always so cold and proud finally seemed to break under the weight. She surrendered the last shred of her dignity. But it was too late. Nothing could go back to the way it was. I wiped away the tears from the corner of my eyes and held her one last time. You'll meet someone you love again. I hope next time you won't let it slip away. With that, I forced myself to stand up, not daring to look back, and quickly walked out of the hospital room. Behind me, the anguish in Liu Ryan's cries was almost overwhelming. Her hoarse voice called out, G-Boater, I can't live without you. I gave her one last glance. Seeing her wrapped in the oversized hospital gown, her eyes red, tears streaming down her face, looking like a pitiful stray dog that's been abandoned, just as I once felt when she left me. I turned and walked out of the room. After that, I never saw Liu Ryan again. She never appeared before me again, but I always had the sense that she was still around me. From the initial heartbreak that felt unbearable, to slowly getting used to it, I used to think that without Liu Ryan, I couldn't survive. But after going through all this, I realized that without her, I seemed to be doing just fine. I had two more relationships after that, but they both ran into issues and ended in breakups. By the time I got to the third relationship, we finally made it to marriage. This woman wasn't as cold or proud as Liu Ryan, but she always put me first. Her phone's password is our anniversary date, and she never hesitates to let me check it. She never had any questionable connections with other men. For my birthday, she planned surprise celebrations, and every night before bed, she would sweetly tell me about all the interesting things that happened that day. As time passed, Liu Ryan became more and more of a distant memory. Even the times I thought of her grew fewer and fewer. Sometimes when her face briefly crossed my mind, I felt absolutely nothing inside. It was as if it all happened in another lifetime. The pain had finally faded away. I knew that I had truly let go. It turns out that time is indeed the best, yet the most ruthless cure. No matter how deep the love, or how agonizing the sleepless nights, eventually it all fades away. The night before my wedding, I received a text message. If he ever treats you badly, come find me. I'll always be waiting for you. Then, perhaps realizing how it might come off as a bit of a curse, another message followed. I wish you happiness. It was from an unfamiliar number. but I instantly knew who it was from. I was lost in thought. When my wife leaned over and asked, "What are you so focused on? Why are you so deep in thought?" I quickly deleted the texts and playfully jumped onto her. Nothing, just some spam messages. Liu Ryan once left a loyal, lovesick, full heartbroken. But even the most wounded heart eventually finds someone who truly and steadfastly loves them. The end.